So, welcome everybody on behalf of the Safeguard Project and also on behalf of the two organisers of this event, the European Landowners Organisation and the Institute for European Environmental Policy, or IEEP as we like to call ourselves. We are here today. A welcome also to our large online audience. You can't see them unfortunately, but we had many people log on for the live streaming. This morning we will share with you two sessions of new research from the Safeguard Project, and the researchers will present. Their presentations will then be followed by a panel who will discuss the challenges that the research is addressed at, and will then pose questions to the researchers, and of course then we will also invite you to pose your questions to the panelists and the researchers. And after all that heavy listening, you will be rewarded by a lunch out here in this beautiful atrium. So, why the Safeguard Project and why pollinators? We all know that there's been a dramatic decline in pollinating insects. In fact, it's still going on. And here we're talking about bees, we're talking about hoverflies, butterflies and moths, and some other insects. The EU launched in 2018 the European Pollinators Initiative as a response to this situation. And one of the things that the initiative called for was more knowledge and more understanding of what we can do to protect pollinators. One of the things this gave birth to was the Safeguard Research Project. What is Safeguard trying to do? It's trying to answer all of the questions. So drivers, pressures, the status of pollinator populations, the responses we can take, and what impacts those responses have on the values that we associate with pollinators and their conservation. The project has already significantly improved the understanding of pollinator populations. We now have very largely updated databases of pollinator species information, their traits, their distributions, and all of this is providing the basis for rolling out pollinator monitoring across the EU. And as we speak, taxonomists are being trained, people are being trained to go out into the field and monitor pollinators. There's a lot more in the project as well, but I won't steal the word from our researchers. Next slide, please. One thing the Safeguard has launched this summer is the Safe Hub. Now this, we hope, will be the online place to go to find out about pollinators. It's a web platform that will be shared between all of the Horizon projects that are now working on pollinators, because there's a whole cluster. And I will point out today that we're also hearing from the Butterfly Project and from Valor. And you will also find out on this platform about Posh Bee and Wild Pea and Pollinera and Showcase and amongst others. What you can already find there are graphic abstracts of the research findings from Safeguard. These are really designed to be easy to read, 2 pages, lots of visuals for a non-academic audience. And we will be producing a lot more of those as the research is coming out now. So, very briefly, to make sure we don't run over time today, I will now pass the word over to Andreas Gumbert from the European Commission. Andreas is part of the team leading the European Pollinators Initiative, so he will tell you what it's all about. Thank you, Andreas.
Well, thank you, Evelyn, and thanks also for the organizers for inviting me for organizing this seminar. I have a presentation. Could we have this, please? While it's up and running, I'm already. Yeah, it's already there. I don't see it here on the screen. Maybe. Yeah, so this is a very timely event. So the member states are currently preparing their national restoration plans. Amongst others, with the aim of reversing the decline of pollinators. So I hope with this seminar we can contribute to this process. So thanks very much for organizing it. May I have the next slide, please? So there is a lot to tell you. So my aim is actually to tell you a little bit what the Commission is doing in relation to pollinators. But I have been asked to keep it short, so I will just scratch the surface. But you can later have the presentation. It is full of links, and you can look at the various documents that I refer to. But let me start with the Nature Restoration Regulation. It establishes a legally binding target to reverse the decline of pollinators. The member states have to monitor pollinator populations. So the Commission is currently working on a delegated act to set out a precise methodology which should be science-based. It should be annual monitoring. And should give a representative picture of what is the situation in terms of pollinator trends in the member states. So, but of course, with monitoring alone, it is not enough. So the member states also have to install restoration measures. So the two have to go together. So you have to do the right thing, and then you also have to be able to talk about it and monitor it. So the restoration measures are currently being put together. Just early in March, the common reporting format has been agreed, and then the plans have to be submitted in September next year in a draft form and will have to be revised in a year. Can I have the next? Ah, yeah, it's already there. This restoration regulation now reinforces the EU Pollinator Initiative that has been up and running since 2018. So the Commission has started this initiative in order to reverse the decline of pollinators. It's a non-binding legal framework, has been revised in 2023, and has basically three objectives: to improve the knowledge, understand what's going on in terms of pollinator trends, the drivers, but also the mitigation measures. Then, of course, tackle the cause of decline, action on the ground, and reach out to society, engage into strategic planning. I've seen that some people are taking photos. The presentation will be distributed, and you can certainly have it. Can I have the next slide, please? So starting with the knowledge dimension, Evelyn has already mentioned it. We are now starting to train people in the identification of pollinators because much of this knowledge has been lost. So these EPIC projects are supported by 3 million euros to train people to identify the main pollinator groups and enable them to undertake the monitoring. And then we also have a whole range of Horizon projects, and only a few are listed here. For instance, Not Safeguard, which is organizing this event here, but also some others. This is just basically a selected list. And these Horizon projects, they are looking, for instance, at the competition between wild and managed pollinators. They're looking at the dependency of society on pollinators. So we have two representatives from Valo and Butterfly here. We'll talk about that later today. Pesticide risk assessment will be improved. And of course, how to best restore pollinator populations in agriculture. And we also have a forthcoming project on pollination and soil. Can I have the next slide, please? Also outside the Horizon Europe project, we are supporting a knowledge generation. I was already mentioning the forthcoming delegated act on the monitoring methodology. This has been prepared over many years by the so-called STING project. And under this link, you can see the reports that have emerged from this activity in terms of how pollinators can best be monitored. We also have monitoring activities other than just on the pollinators themselves. We are also looking at monitoring of drivers of pollinator decline. The EMBARK project is looking at habitat quality. Insignia is looking at pesticide pressure, using bees as sentinels to collect pesticides out in the field, bring them back into the hive where they can be quantified. And you will also see here a link to the latest addition to the red lists, European red lists of insects or of pollinators. Now hoverflies have been added to the bees, butterflies, and moths. Can I have the next slide, please? Now going to the second dimension, tackling pollinator decline, the Commission is supporting or has supported the development of concrete action plans for some pollinator groups that are exposed to particular pressures. And more widely, we are supporting the PollHub project, which is aimed to convince the member states to include pollinators into the group of species, typical species, for habitats that are protected under the Habitat Directive. So at the moment, there are very few insects that are used for the assessment of the conservation status of protected habitats. So this will. So we hope that member states will take on the results from this project and include pollinators as well. We have various activities in relation to pesticides. Here is one live project, the AgriWise project, supporting the member states in the development of binding integrated pest management rules. And let me just mention then the last link. Of course, we also have to reach out to the farming community. So we have supported last year a workshop on pollinator-friendly farming. Of course, the main action on the ground will come from the measures supported by the member states within their nature restoration, with their restoration plans. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide, so I promise to be short. Of course, the Commission is in constant contact with the member states and the various stakeholder groups. So we have a working group on pollinators. It is a subgroup of the EU Biodiversity Platform. This platform is supporting the Commission in the implementation of the EU Biodiversity Strategy. So under this platform, we have this working group on pollinators. It's meeting several times a year, so we are in regular exchange with the member states and also relevant stakeholder groups and to discuss issues on pollinators. There's also an international activity. The FAO is organizing a global platform on pollinators, and the Commission is also supporting this activity. A very recent initiative is the Youth for Pollinators, supported generously by the European Parliament with a budget of 4.5 million euros. So this activity is composed of 3 elements. So first of all, there is a youth citizen assembly. So we are inviting 100 young people to come together to Brussels, discuss pollinators, develop a grassroots movement, express their views and what could best be done. We are reaching out to schools in the Buzzing School project, and there is 1 million euros available for small grants to support young people in the development of ideas what could be done on pollinators. We really believe that it is very important to invest into young people in order to get a lasting effect on policy development. So this is this was my last slide. You see, it was not a comprehensive overview, but you see that pollinator support requires many different activities, and of course today we are also contributing to this process. So I wish us all a very productive seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. You will have an opportunity to ask him questions later today. What I would like to do now is bring up our first 2 safeguard researchers. I would like to introduce Tom Breeze, a senior researcher at the University of Reading. Tom is both an ecologist and an economist of pollination services, not something you come across every day. He's contributed to many pollinator initiatives and research, and that includes the EU pollinator scheme and the UK one, which came first, and the IEEP pollinator assessment, for those of you familiar with that. His colleague, Georgios Kleftodimos, is Associate Professor in Environmental and Agricultural Economics in Montpellier, and he specializes in the economic valuation of pollination services and agri-environmental policy. He is a lead expert for the French National Agency for Food and Environmental Safety, ANSES, so he advises them on pollinators and pollination. And he also has many projects on his agenda, on his to-do list. Over to you.
Thanks, Evelyn. Right, so we decided rather than doing a presentation each to do a bit of a double act. So I'm going to cover the first few slides, and then I'm going to pass over to Yorgos to cover the remainder. But what we wanted to do is, with this talk, this is less about major results from Safeguard and more about sort of where the thinking from Safeguard has led us and where we'd like to go in the future. And it's very much about sort of taking what we know about the value of pollinators a lot further. So, oh, this is not the order. I think slides have gotten mixed up because this is the middle of the presentation. Anyway, so, okay, yeah, this has very much gone off script. Apologies for this. There was, yeah, so. We know there's an awful lot of different methods to manage pollinators, and Andri will be talking about some of the specific findings of the Safeguard project later on. But some of our major findings are that alternative farming systems, such as agroforestry, mixed intercropping, etc., can provide significant boosts to pollinator populations and pollination services in the short and long term. There's also a range of targeted habitat interventions where we're looking at actually adding specific plants for specific pollinators in specific landscapes and just generally protected areas. And protected areas doesn't necessarily have to be nature reserves. Several studies are finding that actually urban areas can be just as good for pollinators, but with a bit of a caveat that you tend to get the same species. The EU has already supported several policies that can support pollinators, including agri-environment schemes or eco schemes. Habitat protections, this is just a map of Central Europe of some of the Natura 2000 sites that I clipped out, and various bee health programs as well. So there's been a lot of effort has been put into the preservation of pollinators. And yeah, this is not the right version of this talk at all. Sorry about this, folks. There is definitely stuff missing here. There's a lot of costs associated with this management, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, from the direct costs of actually putting things in, to opportunity costs because you are asking farmers to give up land to plant wildflowers, maintain hedgerows, and take other actions to preserve pollinators, as well as the transactional costs of if you want to move to a more transformative system like agroforestry. It has a long lead-in time, and it can take a very long time to start to yield results. This is a challenge because we are well aware that farming is under an awful lot of pressure, downward pressure in particular. So if farmers don't benefit from pollinators, and many of them don't, if they're growing cereals, if they're producing livestock, then there's very little monetary incentive for them to do this. And also, a lot of crops only benefit to a modest extent. What we're seeing in the UK and in some of Yorgos's work is that actually areas with high inputs still have high yields, even if they're projected to have low pollinators. Now, there's a range of other factors around this, and the slide unfortunately seems to be missing, which we outline that there are pollination deficits. So just because they're getting higher yields than areas with higher pollinator populations doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually getting the best yields they could be getting, or the most stable. And it may take many years to see a return on investment. There's a classic study from the US which showed it, depending on the price of blueberries, which is already a high price crop, you're talking between 5 and 10 years to get a proper return on the investment there. And these things need to be accounted for. They need to be, landowners need proper support around that. There is some potential. Some work we did do in Safeguard is this work on the co-benefits of pollinator management in that they can provide multiple other ecosystem services. And a lot of farmers that we've spoken to, particularly in a former European project, FP7 Liberation, a lot of these ecosystem services, like soil erosion, weed control, water regulation, these actually matter to most farmers more than pollinators do. So hopefully in the future, we're intending to explore these co-benefits in more depth, and Andrew might speak a little bit about that, I hope. Yes, great, because they've been doing some excellent work at Padua on this. Okay, on to moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
What's
Okay,
now it's
scramble.
a correct version.
Yeah, no, this is the start of the presentation.
Do you want to speak at the decline as you're more expert, and then
Yeah,
to catch up for the value chains?
all right, yes. Sorry about this, folks. This was not in the script. So yeah, we were talking about pollinators. And who are pollinators? Well, bees and hoverflies. This is actually one I took on campus. The University of Reading has a great campus. So it's a hornet mimic hoverfly, Volucella zonaria, and bumblebee. But also around Europe, we have some butterfly pollinators. Some very small insects, including thrips. These are actually major pollinators of cocoa in Eastern Africa. But we also have bats. We have hummingbirds as pollinators, even in Europe. And some of the work we're doing in the Valor project, actually in the Canary Isles, hummingbirds are quite significant pollinators over there. And I love this image because it shows the real diversity of bees in Europe. With the euro for reference, so from a tiny lazy glossum all the way up to this huge Xylocopa, which is an absolutely gorgeous species. But we know, as Evelyn mentioned, that bee and hoverfly species have declined across Europe and North America. This is a study from the UK, which shows basically the diversity of bumblebees and hoverflies has declined on average on a per square basis across the UK since 1980. This is only based on the very limited available data we have, but the UK has a longer history of data collection than a lot of countries, so we're very fortunate in that regard. And we've all heard about this. There's a lot of evidence that things like land use change, agrochemical use, and climate change are the main drivers of these declines, but also a lower diversity of species, not just about the abundance, but lower diversity will increase the risks of shocks to pollination services. And yeah, this is actually the proper version of the presentation. Yeah, so a whole different range of species are important for pollinating different crops at different times of the year and across different scales. And to make matters worse, beekeepers, and who should not be forgotten in this conversation, are also facing growing pressures from disease, particularly the spread of new diseases due to climate change, and the rising costs of managing those diseases, as medicines and just the raw materials they need are getting much more expensive, whilst prices for honey aren't necessarily rising very much. So in terms of crop pollination, we've heard an awful lot about how important pollination is, but it's around 3/4 of the world's crops benefit to some extent from pollination. These are actually strawberries that I found as a photo I took. So the one left is an improperly pollinated strawberry that shouldn't have been included, but I love it. I love that it was, because it's a great example of why proper pollination is important. That is not marketable quality, and that would not pass grade normally. So it's really important for that quality aspect. It's not important for cereal crops, but it is very important for a lot of the high-value horticulture, spice, and stimulant crops. Particularly, you've probably drank some of it this morning in the form of coffee. And the actual level of pollination services is affected by behaviour, the abundance, and the diversity of pollinator species. So it's not just a matter of having more, you need a higher diversity of them, and they need to be the right species that behave in the right ways. Tomatoes are a good example of this. Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture of a tomato being pollinated, but they need bumblebees to pollinate them because they vibrate the flower. Yeah. And having a diversity of pollinators is also important for building resilience to pollinator losses. So if you are growing crops in a rotation, you will need different pollinators for different crops in that rotation. And also, one of the opportunities of climate change is it does allow us to grow crops in places we hadn't previously been able to, and they might require pollinators in areas which we haven't traditionally thought about that. So having a good diversity is important in that case. But also for protecting against the short-term shocks, bad years, extreme weather, etc., or the longer-term impacts of climate change that just force species out of their traditional ranges. So pollination deficits, is this really a problem? Well, the last global study estimated around 4.7% of global crop production is currently being lost due to inadequate pollination. And in European apple orchards, we've widely observed a whole range of deficits, ranging from 9% in Germany all the way up to 26% pollination deficit in the Netherlands. In a lot of EU countries are now starting to create markets for pollination services or searching for some sort of mechanical replacement. I was actually involved in this bottom example in the Gobi Desert in China, where there a lot of small, high sustainability, solar-powered greenhouses producing tomatoes, but they have a problem of they can't actually get boxes of bumblebees in because they can't buy them in any less than 100 at a time, and they're only very small holders, so they don't actually need that many. So they're trying to breed a new line for them. We've heard a lot about how important and valuable pollinators are. The IPBES global assessment puts the total value at between $235 and $577 billion a year. This map is very out of date, I should stress. This is from the IPBES assessment, which is nearly 10 years old. And the area of pollinator-dependent crops has grown by more than 70% since 1961. It's actually grown by about another 10% since this map. So, and although we could rely on managed pollinators, this study, also coming out of China, demonstrates quite nicely that we don't have adequate numbers. We do not have adequate global stocks of honeybees to provide pollination services alone. And even within Europe, where we could theoretically create a big cross-national market, there are issues with things like language barriers. Just because, say, Slovenia has a very large beekeeper population doesn't necessarily mean that you can easily arrange a contract with them to provide pollination services in Germany. And these represent only the value to primary agricultural production. This is really what we wanted to talk about with this session. And in particular, we've tried through Safeguard and other projects to take it a little bit beyond the farm level. And this is a study I was part of, where we looked at the value of pollinators in trade. Currently, we import over 200 million euros worth of raw pollinated crops annually. That is just raw crops, not processed. And they range from cocoa, the bottom one is actually coffee, tomatoes, but also rapeseed, soy, sunflowers. We import huge quantities of these things. Pollinator losses can, in theory, result in an increase in price and damage producer profits. And that can have an impact on the availability and affordability of nutritious food. And actually, the places that are theoretically worse hit by this are also places which already have issues with vitamin deficiency. So what we did in this study, is this going? Yeah, what we did in this study is we knocked out pollinators in the EU and then used a very basic trade model to just look at what would be the impact around the world. And as you can see, even knocking out pollinators in the EU, it's beneficial for the price of produce in Brazil, in the US, in Canada, but it actually causes big economic losses in India, in Japan, in Russia, in China. We also, in this study though, so that part isn't published, that's part of a Safeguard output, but what is published is this, where we knocked out pollinators in heavily indebted poor countries. So these are countries that are classed by the World Bank as heavily indebted poor countries. They're subject to quite significant levels of debt relief. There is some debate that some of these countries should probably not be on that list anymore, particularly Ghana. But we knocked out pollinators in just those countries. We just assumed pollinator loss in those and everyone else is fine. And the impacts, as you can see, are not primarily in those countries. Those countries do in some cases suffer losses, the Côte d'Ivoire in particular, but actually the biggest losses are in Europe, in China, in the US. Because we have a globalized trade market, focusing on pollination, pollinator conservation just within our own borders is not going to protect us from the impacts of pollinator losses. And where we're going with this work, and I will actually hand over to Yorgos after this, is looking at pollinators in the wider value chain. So we purchase crops, as I say, we import a lot of raw crop, but a lot of the real value isn't from agriculture. Agriculture accounts for 1.8% of EU GDP. Food is a very different system, and we transform crops into all sorts of things, from drinks to drinking cocoa and chocolate, to paste, to even things like yogurts, of which this is coming from livestock, which are in turn fed on pollinator-dependent crops. And the value of pollination along those chains generally increases the further up you go, because it's in the later stages that the value is truly added, particularly when you think about industries beyond food. Fashion. Cotton is a pollinator-dependent crop, and it will have a 25 to 30% yield loss with inadequate pollination. So a lot of the fashion industry is also dependent on pollinators. Biofuel. And even the secondary industries that arise from the products of pollinator-dependent crops. Coffee houses all over Europe employ tens of thousands of people. And if there were a significant loss of pollinators, particularly in places like Indonesia, with a price shock, how many people in Europe are going to lose their jobs because people can't afford to go to coffee shops anymore? So the risks that these actors face from pollinator losses currently are not widely considered in decision making. And different actors, in turn, are going to put different pressures on pollinators. We know that farming can put direct pressures on pollinators, but what's often not discussed are the indirect pressures that actors further up the chain can place on pollinators because of an increase in demand for particular crops, or for particular crops at certain prices, and that can encourage a lot of the pressures that are on pollinators. So now I'm actually going to hand over to Yorgos.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. So, exactly as Tom said, in order to estimate the cascading effects of pollinators collapse, we have to study the different value chains that these products are entering and what outputs are giving. So this is quite a new field that we have started working recently, and the projects that Butterfly, Valor, and the other projects are going to investigate more. But here is an example that we are working currently in Occitanie region in the south of France, where we tried to analyze and to estimate the value chain of pollination and to see the different value chains that are entering and the different values that they are providing. So we have the apicultural sector with so many different products that they are contributing, from pharmaceutical to pastry soaps to candy soaps to literally many different value chains. We have the pollination services that are pollinating a series of crops with different values in high surfaces. So it's a little bit difficult to see, but it was a little bit difficult also to integrate this because there's so many different value chains. Just if we take an example, the majority of the honey produced in the region are sold directly to the consumers, but we have also the sunflower honey that is selling to the bakery shops in order to produce the pastries. So this gives an added value of almost 11 euros per kilo in the already existing value that the pastry shops are buying from the beekeepers. So we have seen that only in one channel, we almost double the price of the product. Similarly, if we are speaking pollination services, we can see that for the production, for example, of vegetables, we have prices that are between 43 to 50 euros per hive, because here we are in a situation where there is a pollination services market. If we go then to the production of wild flora, you know that in south of France we have a lot of wild plants that are serving for pharmaceutical and other businesses, so a collapse of the pollination services will conclude a collapse of the wild flora and a cascading effect in the pharmaceutical industry. So all this, and this we are speaking about a small scale, but still, due to the difficulty to collect data, it takes a lot of time. But this is a goal that we have in the future projects, to expand at national and European level in order to investigate more the cascading effects. So this is a slide that Tom explained well. I mean, the pollinator management can be in different systems. I will pass this and I will go to the policies. Tom explained very well that we have different kind of programs to protect pollinators coming from the second pillar or from other initiatives. But however, through the first pillar of CAP, for the first time, we have the eco schemes. The countries are free to create their own eco schemes, and we have some countries that they have created eco schemes in order to protect wild pollinators. For example, in France, there is an eco scheme that provides almost 50 euros per hectare in order to dedicate at least 4% of the land in pollinator-friendly practices. So an extra tool for the farmers to protect even more the pollinators. As Tom said, I mean, the problem is that implementing these measures has a lot of costs. The cost can be separated in different, like transaction costs or opportunity costs, while the benefits may not be directly seen by the farmers. Here I have to add that in many countries, especially, I mean, we are speaking about EU, different countries, different institutional aspects, so we are facing a lot of socio-cultural issues, not apart from transactional or opportunity cost. We have socio-cultural issues for the adoption of these kind of measures. For example, in France or in Italy, we have seen that these measures require a change in the working plan of the farmers, and the farmers are very resistant in order to change their working plans, even if no supplementary costs are arriving. But for example, if we force them to spray or to take or to use the pesticide during night, this is a heavy risk for them. So we have always to consider the risk aversion of in the different contexts within the countries and within the same country. Here are the several co-benefits. I will pass to go directly to the regulations. So we have, Andreas presented the nature restoration regulation and the monitoring schemes that are implementing. We have the pollination initiative that has been reinforced. The previous scheme had some problems regarding the adoption of the practices. For example, maybe Tom has also, because to my knowledge only France and UK implemented the first round of the pollinator initiative. In France, we had the problem that this initiative was launched together with the national plan for the pesticide use. You have seen the last year what is happening in France and the strikes against the pesticide use. So even if they took some measures through the pollination initiative, it didn't give much of results because the use of pesticides, instead of decrease, increased the last 5 years. So, I mean, again, we are coming to that we have always, apart from the cost and the benefits, we have always to consider the special socio-economic and socio-cultural aspects that has every country in order to convince and to integrate farmers and other stakeholders in the decision-making process. So we have several initiatives, as we said, that where companies, value chains or stakeholders, they can address in order to have aid and investments for the nature. from the Common Agricultural Policy and from other initiatives like the Pollination Initiative, both from the, and now from the Common Agricultural Policy, both from first pillar and second pillar of CAP. So we have many different projects that are running now in order to address different issues. So we have projects that are trying to make better cost-benefit analysis by integrating the value chains and estimating the cascading effects. We have projects that are trying to identify the potential barriers and opportunities in order to motivate the stakeholders to adopt and to start using restoration practices. We are trying to create new business models by integrating all these benefits and costs in order, at the farm level, new business models, especially in Valor, for example, and butterfly projects are going to develop business models at the farm level, but also in industry and in other stakeholders of the value chain in order to adopt restoration measures and also to find new market channels in order to distribute their products. And also consumer behavior studies are taking place, eco-labs are creating and tested in order to motivate consumers to buy products that they have been produced by protecting pollinators. So, as you can see, through RESTPOL, Valor, AgriPol, and Butterfly, this is just 4 projects that are running at the same time, we are trying to capture the whole value chain from the producer to the consumer in order to raise all the barriers and find new opportunities for the adoption of restoration practices and the protection of pollinators. And here is some questions that it's mostly for you, and we can, of course, discuss how we can capture the value of pollinators in a way that is useful to food business and to other value chain actors, how we can use this type of economic valuation to build links between the owners and the other value chain actors, what can public institutions do to better communicate and mainstream these values to the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom and Georgios, despite the difficulties. That was really fascinating. Well done. And they've done such a good job with timekeeping. We have a bit of time if anyone has any questions on what they've just told you. No burning questions right now. Yes? Go ahead.
Thank you for a very nice
Sorry.
second presentation.
Yes. Is it working? Yeah? All right. Thank you, Tom and Georgios, for a very nice second presentation. It was really wonderful with also all the pictures. I was wondering, there was, maybe it's too detailed, but I saw somewhere standing that there was a 200 million import of pollinator-depending high-end products in the EU, and I was thinking like, 200 million, that is virtually nothing in the EU.
So that's just raw, to add, that is just raw product. And also those figures are several years old. I had wanted to update that. However, the FAO has updated its database and has added an awful lot more categories since we did that. So it was a little bit nightmarish trying to get that done on the Eurostar over here. So it is almost certainly higher than that. But as I say, that is just raw product. So that's not including cake from oil seed. It's not including roasted coffee. It's not including juices or anything like that. So that is just raw, fresh produce.
Yeah, so that is non-roasted coffee or non-roasted cacao, things like that.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, on the European market, 200 million is...
Well, that's net as well. So some countries are importing more than that, and some countries, so Spain is a net exporter of pollinated crops, for instance, so its total pollinated imports are negative. So yeah, probably should have added that disclaimer.
All right, thank you.
Kurt Geisert, I'm one of the guides in the House of European History. We were speaking about France and United Kingdom on an equal footing. Is United Kingdom involved in these programs as member states of the European Union are?
In terms of the research projects, yes, we are. We were able to rejoin Horizon last year, thank goodness. So I'm actually coordinating the Valor project. So yeah, the UK is very much involved in all of these, and the British government is still, despite its turbulence, let's be politically correct here, it's still very engaged on pollinator-related issues. They're still very popular with the British public. So, Afa.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Can I? You will have a chance to ask these two questions again when we open the questions after the panel discussions. Sorry to cut you off. What I would like to do now is I would like to introduce our panel. And as I introduce you, I'd like you to come up and grab one of these microphones, take a seat. And then I will launch the panel discussion. We'll have a round from the panelists, and then you will be able to pose more questions. And that will include questions to you too. So please take a seat until we get to that point. Okay, so we have a great first panel. I will start with Athanasios, ask you to come up. He is a sustainability strategist with expertise in biodiversity, regenerative agriculture, and supply chain resilience. And his consultancy De La Tierra supports farming communities through trade and technology. And he's here today, amongst other reasons, because he works closely with a company called Innocent Drinks. And I'm not sure if you've all had an Innocent Drinks, but they're really fruit-rich smoothies, and they've really grown big on the market. Then we have Frank Bogovic, and he, until recently, worked hard as an MEP. He's very familiar with the European Landowners Organisation until last summer. But, very interestingly, he also produces apples. Is that right? And do you also keep bees? Right, in the family. We also have Andreas Ziermann, and he is here from the Lake Constance Foundation, which is a not-for-profit based in southern Germany, and they have a lot of very interesting initiatives with farmers, including one called Pollinator Ambassadors, but you'll hear more from Andreas himself. And lastly, we have Casey Woodward, and he set up a company called Agri-Sound, and as you can guess, this is tech and AI, and they do interesting things to monitor pollinators. So while the panel gets settled, I will go back to our topic. And as you heard from Tom and Georgios, we can put economic numbers on our pollination service. But I wanted to point out here that they also do research on all the other values that people associate with pollinators. And one of the amazing things about pollinators in Europe now, well, all over the world, is that many people care about them. Many people understand the pollination that they do, and they put values on this. But these values are multifaceted. There are many different ways in which we value pollinators, and also the ways in which we think we can help them. Now, farmers are as multifaceted as we all are, but at the same time, and have many motivations to protect pollinators, but at the same time, they are running a business, and they have to do this under the economic constraints of farming. And as we heard, we're all very aware of the pressures that farmers are under. It's very much part of the discourse here in Brussels. And just to mention two things that are happening right now. The Commission has put forward a proposal to change the Common Market Organisation regulations so that farmers can negotiate contracts in a more advantageous way in the value chain. And also to change the Unfair Trading Practices Directive to make cross-border contracts and values fairer for farmers. And this includes, for example, a better legal situation for farmers to set up sustainability initiatives and contracts with buyers that put in sustainability criteria for a better price. And lastly, the recently launched Agri-Food Observatory of the Commission is actively now developing methods and indicators to measure costs across the value chain. So these are all things in which pollinator and pollination services will play a big role. So I'll kick off the panel now with Athanasios. Tell us what's the value of pollinators in the innocent drinks business, and what have you done to help?
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. In terms of innocent, 86% of ingredients rely directly or indirectly on pollinators. So as a business, innocent is over reliant in terms of pollinator services, so it's of high material importance. And in terms of the products it makes, juices and smoothies, there's nowhere to hide. So whenever there are climatic shocks resulting in loss in yield, that directly impacts the price. So as a business, highly sensitive to price fluctuations caused by climatic and other shocks to fruit production, not only in Europe, but around the world.
And turning to Frank, you see this from both the view from policy and from being a producer. What are your main takes on this issue, and what do you think needs to be changed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm apple producer since 1986. Later I came in politics, and now, after all these years, I try to look on all these topics we speak here, or we spoke in European Parliament when I was 10 years, from this practical way. How to introduce this, what we speak about, measures which we make in real life. Because sometimes I think things are disconnected, and it's not easy to farmers to understand this. I'm in both roles. I really try to work on this way. And if I can say, I started to bring beehives in my orchards in the end of 80s. There was one friend of mine. Each springtime we brought these beehives because I knew very well what it means for my apples. If I bring, I don't know, at the time I had 5 hectares, and we brought around 10 beehives, and it was very good for quality, especially, not only quantity, for my apples. Later, when I was in local politics, and I was also Minister for Agriculture in Slovenia, and now I'm here, I see this transformation of agriculture sector. I know very well what we farmers use to spray, which pesticides, insecticides. It's in 90s, in 2000, and in Slovenia, in my country, we started with integrated pest management before we entered in European Union, and we had the schemes, and about this scheme was also the entrance to the market, and everybody knew if you are in this scheme, you respect some rules, and I think that this is connected with these CAP rules when you have conditionality and also additional things. And I think that we really raised the level, what we are doing in the orchards now, or what was allowed in the past. And these rules are changed each year, and this is transformation of sector. For Slovenia, I can say the most important role in these topics about pollinators, the most important role are Beekeepers Association, Slovenian Beekeeper Association. Because in Slovenia we are 2 million population, and we have 11,000 beekeepers. It's the biggest density of beekeepers. And these are usually small. Few of them in Slovenia are 100 plus hives. Most of them between, I don't know, 5, 20, 25 hives. And you have in each village, few of them. And I think that they made a lot of action. For example, one was honey breakfast. It was, I was part of this action also. When I was minister, we transformed this in breakfast of local products. honey, apple, milk, bread, and there are 1 week action in the primary school, kindergartens. Last year it was close to 300,000 pupils who were involved in this. And through this, I think that we did what was also in this action plan to learn, to teach population how important it is. And the biggest mistake which can farmer do in Slovenia is if you harm bees. And since 2011, we had no murder of bees in Slovenia. And I think that in this way, through this practical way, and what is good for farmers, what is good for beekeepers, good for society, we can do a lot also for the wild pollinators and pollinators.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Andreas. So there are many benefits that conservation of wild pollinator brings beyond pollinating crops. How can we support farmers to really invest in pollinator conservation and reward that?
Yeah, thank you for this question. In this, I want to emphasize that the farmers, not just food producers, but also soil managers, climate managers, biodiversity managers, and yeah, therefore it's important to support them. One approach is to compensate them for their measures. In 2010, Lake Constance Foundation, together with beekeepers and local food distributing company and Rewe, which is one of the largest retailers in Germany, launched a project for the improvement or to protect wild bees especially and other pollinators. And it started with 10 farmers, which created flower stripes and bridges for birds of prey and structures like hedges and trees and so on. And Rewe paid for the environmental advice for the farmers and also for the measures. So yeah, it's quite successful today. It's ongoing throughout Germany. There are 540 farmers throughout Germany which are growing fruits and vegetables also. And yeah, I think 8.8 million square meters of flower stripes has been built. As insect hotels is another a very important topic, and I want to highlight that also that's not just about the honeybee. It's also a lot about the white bees and other pollinators, which are also kind of indicator for a healthy biodiversity and ecosystem, and also for the farmers. The white bees are active in lower temperatures, where the honeybees still smooth in the beehive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. What does the Rewe supermarket, where do they see the benefits of this, and how are they seeing it in their long-term strategy?
Well, one advantage is there's for sure then an image. Yeah. And also, as we heard before, it's yeah, good for the quantity and quality as well. Yeah.
So they recognise it also as decreasing the risk in their supply chains. They're doing it partly for the image and partly for also as a long-term risk.
Well, this project, it's formally called Pro Planet. Now, due to Green Claims Directive, it's just a biodiversity project, but it's still ongoing. Sorry, what is the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll come back to it. Just about the perspective of the supermarket and their long-term perspective. But let's turn to Casey now. So we have some interesting tech here. What role is that playing in trying to get better value along the food chain?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's so we've created a small product which I handily have one here, which which is a smart listening device. So the idea that this is a small station that can be deployed in the field. It's powered by solar, and what it's doing is listening out for the wing beat frequencies of a specific pollinator types, and can use that information to map out where there are pollinator deficits in the field and where there might be an overabundance of pollinators as well. So we're using this information in a whole range of different ways. We work very closely with retailers, primarily in the UK, but also further afield as well. And we deploy these into a range of different crop types, many of which are pollinator dependent crops, and that is great because we're able to help the farmers to improve yield. But from a retailer perspective, we can also show quality improvements as well as shelf life extension as well. So there's a very strong economic benefit from that perspective. But also clearly, you know, we as consumers care about bees, and certainly from a UK perspective, when we work with retailers and they survey consumers in stores, very commonly the decline of pollinators particularly is the #1 sustainability issue that they engage with the strongest. It's very visceral, and people understand it much more than greenhouse gas emissions and carbon, which obviously equally are very important problems as well. So I think there is a very tangible brand benefit as well from being seen to be supporting of that. But beyond that as well, even for those farmers which are not producing crops which are dependent on pollinators, in that rotation, we know that, you know, it might be for potatoes at the moment, but it could be oilseed rape in the next rotation. And so therefore, maintaining a healthy population of pollinators in that local area is important for long-term resilience. And that's what this device helps people to be able to show.
And how does the deal work for the farmers? Because obviously they're investing then in improving the pollinator friendliness of their farming fields and getting the information from the device. How is that rewarded?
Yeah, so excellent question. So I think it's twofold. So I think in many cases that our customer is the retailer or the processor. So they're the ones who are actually purchasing the devices. So the farmers or the producers actually have the benefit of having the device and hosting the device at no cost. But secondly, the data is also being used to drive further on-farm benefits, and particularly around access to things like green finance and green capital products. So when we saw some of the slides earlier, there's a whole range of incentives that are coming onto the market to show that actually, if you can showcase that you are having positive impacts from a sustainability perspective beyond just carbon emissions, then that can be rewarded in terms of reduced interest rates on remortgaging farms and things like that.
Right. And we heard from Tom that it takes maybe years of investment to restore the wild pollinator population, so they're really providing a quantifiable benefit to your crop production. Can I turn back to Frank and ask you, so an apple producer in Slovenia invests in restoring hedges, planting flower strips, reducing their pesticide use or going completely organic. Do they get that, can they recoup that investment through the sale of their apples, and if not, why?
Yeah, it must be linked always that farmers are interested to do something more and do something what is good for the pollinators. And for example, as I said, we had in past this integrated pest management, and this scheme is still today. In my production, I have three certificates. First is this integrated pest management. There are rules behind this, what you must do. Then is the local production. And the third is this international global gap standard. And all these standards helps us to come on the market. For example, I sell my apples through one company. There are few of us, 20, 30 of us. And if you don't have this standard, you cannot come in this chain, because this is the request from the retailers. And I think this is the one way that, and through these schemes, I think, like we have these eco schemes, we can improve the technology of our production, which is more pollinator friendly. And first, I think that we got some subsidies for this from second pillar, and this is one way how I think it's the best way that somebody introduced this, what is later standard, what is the conditionality after a few years, and many things change in this direction. So these standardizations are very good. There are also some measures about precision farming, about precision spraying, precision use of fertilizers or other things. These measures are also, I think, important. And what Andreas, I think, said is, I think that the most important part of this is how to explain to consumer through retailers that these are premium products and must reach higher price. All we know that the costs for food in Europe is around 12% of our income. Farmers, we get only 3%. And I think that here is enough space that we must get this premium price or additional income also through the market, not just subsidies. If we succeed to come from 3 to 4% of income what we pay for the food, just to 1% more of the whole price of food, it is the same money as whole CAP policy is. So I think it's impossible to reach only through European subsidies because it's not enough money. But if we work together hand in hand with retailers, it's possible with all consumers. One of the best ways is if you can sell at home. And this is entrance for selling at home, are these standards, this cooperation with people, that people know this. And as I said, I think that in Slovenia we have quite a good story, and it is mostly made because all these stakeholders are involved. And this is the way how I think we can do the best things, that the farmers are interested for these measures and that we do something good for pollinators.
Thank you. So Frank has thrown up a very big question there. How much do we pay for our food, and should we be paying more? So that's over to you.
It's not necessary to pay more. Perhaps this is image, like you said, forever.
Yes.
When I arrived on the airport, I see electric bus.
Mm-hmm.
This is image. This is good for nature, but we in renewable energy we pay a lot for this, but sometimes it's a little question.
So how much should public subsidies do? Is there other ways in which farmers can get more without that ending up in a higher price in the shop at the end? Athanasius, you see this from a global perspective. How do you see strategies to get this investment in the farming systems to recover these pollinators and make sure that that is rewarded through the economic chain?
Yeah, good question. Part of the challenge, or I guess the first step, is demonstrating the economic importance. And fortunately, we're dealing with crops which do benefit from pollination, so you can work out the pollinator deficit and demonstrate a sort of the economic opportunity of plugging the gap. What we find that there's great collaboration within the industry. So I've just completed my tenure as chair of the Sustainable Juice Platform, part of the European Juice Association. And what we see is great collaboration between value chain actors, and a lot of money is put in collaborative projects. Everybody seems to recognise the collective challenges, but there are challenges of scaling some of these practices on a commercial level. Part of it is practical challenges, as Tom and Yorgos highlighted in their presentation, where, so for example, if you introduce wildflower strips, it's not just a question of dispersing seeds. How do you establish and maintain wildflower strips? There's traffic taking place between the rows, and all of that needs to be managed like it's another crop. So there are practical challenges and commercial challenges in terms of scaling pilot projects which can demonstrate the benefits. So those are some of the challenges we're seeing.
Thank you very much. So what I will ask you panelists to do, I'm going to give you a little while to think about this. I want you to pose a question to Tom and Georgios. What would you want to know from research that would help your contribution to pollinator and the values? And in the meantime, while they think about this, are there any questions from the audience? Is anybody ready yet? Have you had a chance to think about this too? Yes, indeed. Do we have a microphone going around?
Yes, thank you for all your input. I was wondering, we have been talking about the food chain and the position of supermarkets you referred to. From my experience, so if you want to produce in a more sustainable way as a farmer, this usually brings higher costs for the farmer. And somehow this has to be paid for. Evelyn, you already referred to that. And in the Netherlands anyway, and I think in Germany it's a bit the same, the supermarkets are competing on prices. So when you see advertisements of supermarkets, they always say, we got the best product, oh yes, and for the lowest price ever. So I was wondering, how do you see that, and how can you think of a method to overcome this? Because if they want to lower the prices all the time, and food prices are already very low, if they want to reduce those prices all the time, the farmer will be in the end the one who pays for this, and in the end he will not be able to produce sustainable. So that will be my question to reflect on.
And are you directing that at all of the panelists, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, I think mainly to Andreas and to Frank, as you mentioned it primarily.
Well, I tried, and then maybe you you have more time to think about it. Well, yeah, thank you for the question. This is also what we recognize in our projects together with farmers, that farmers, if they know the interlinks, they are willing to do more for wild bees, for example, for pollinators, but they are in kind of a corset due to the price. Well, for farmers which are dependent on this great supermarket, or the large food retailers, yeah, it's hard to get higher prices. You can connect in food distributing companies to strengthen the amount of yield, and also to strengthen the forces. And well, for others, I have another example from Germany. The brewery Neumarkter Lamsbräu is already taking 1% of their turnover. It was also discussed in COP16 in Cali, I think, to spend 1% of the turnover in sustainable projects and for the farmers. And these are 180 farmers in their kind of association, and yeah, they got the money. So it's even more than just be compensated. They got more money for. They got a higher price for their product. But this isn't really an answer to your question. Yeah, we have in Germany there large retailers with a lot of power. Well, so far we don't have the recipe to fight this. But maybe one of you have
just a very quick response. If you look at the true value of food systems, for every €1 in terms of the value of food production, there are €2 in social, environmental, and health costs. Costs to our health, costs to pollution, climate change. So until some of those hidden costs or the externalities, until they're brought into the price of food being paid by consumers, which we still pay, we pay with our health, we pay with our taxes, but until they embedded in the cost of food production, and we have an equitable value chain, and I agree with the comments Frank has made, that the burden for change seems to be falling on the shoulders of the farming community, whereas the greatest profit seems to be further downstream of the value chain.
If I may add, as I said, I was member of parliament between 2014 and 24, 10 years, and at the beginning of the first mandate we started to speak about the directive of unfair practices in food value chain. It needs time that we came, that at the end we have this directive and we must improve and introduce this in the national scheme, because there is the big concentration among retailers in all countries, between 3 to 5 of them. They cover between 2/3 and 80% of whole value chain, all what is selling, and that's a problem. They are very strong. And what I said before, on the base of the rules which we accept as farmers, we have similar retailers here, for example, Spar in Slovenia or Hofer. There are long-term contracts that we know that our apples will be in their stores. For sure, they don't guarantee prices, but sometimes it's very important because we know apple from Poland, from other countries arrived, especially after this Russian crisis, and we had the problem to access to the market. So the first is this access, and through these certificates, for example, selection quality, direct translation from izbrana kakovost in Slovenia. There are rules which are, first of all, rules about pest management, sustainable pest management, plus local production, so that we, together with retailers, we knock on the consumers. This was produced in Slovenia, and they also advertise products through faces of farmers. This is very. Sometimes we don't believe that all products are from these farmers, or that there is perhaps also the advertising, but they use this, and in this direction I think that in more fair relation between those all actors in value chain, this is the perspective for long-term, for farmers, for retailers, and for consumers.
Thank you. Another question. And please tell us who you are before you ask.
Jürgen Binder. I was a professional beekeeper for 25 years and love Slovenia beekeeping. The question is, how do we encourage the farmers' unions to take this issue for serious? I realize that they neglect that there is a problem, and how can we continue if the actors, the more regional you go, the more they neglect the issue, if they neglect that there is a problem.
Question about farmers' unions. Does anyone feel that they can answer that? Frank?
Yes, I really admire also Slovenian beekeepers. And what is, I think, very important in Slovenia, we have this advisory service for agriculture goes through chamber, but for beekeepers, direct through Beekeepers Association. They have knowledge, they have money, they have knowledge, and they have influence. And really, through the society, support beekeeping in Slovenia, and they are very strong. For example, this was Slovenian initiative for World Bee Day. It's United Nations 22nd of May, the birthday of Anton Janša, who was teacher in Vienna on Imper, Austro-Hungarian Imper. And for example, last year, there is around 4,000 or 5,000 people, a lot of beekeepers in uniform, with flags, with other things. And last year, the speaker was president of Slovenia. And this year, our guest will be Commissioner Christopher Hansen. And through all these actions and through visibility of this association, and what is also very important, we never attack each other. It was very interesting time during this regulation of sustainable use of pesticides. In Slovenia, we didn't attack each other. We did and explained what we did in last 15 years. Me as member of parliament and Boštjan Noč, who is Slovenian Beekeepers Association president, today also European Beekeepers Association president, we together go in front of journalists and explain what we are doing and in which direction we will go. Not with ideological proposals, but with practical way how to come to closer and to work together. And the main reason for success in Slovenia is that we work together, not one against each other. And as I said, the density of beekeeper is so big that if you fail, they will put finger to your head and you are dead as producer.
Thank you.
Please let me add
Yeah.
something to advice training is of course something, but beyond this, I think we need to emphasize this pure need. For example, you mentioned the global gap, their labels and standards, and if they have criteria for biodiversity, this spreading the topic to a very, very broad farmership. And for that, we developed also in another project, at least in Surcouf project, we did a screening of labels and standards, how much their criteria affects biodiversity, and recommended also improvements, possible improvements. And this is one part of a need, and the other part is the reporting directives. Through that, companies have to get into this topic, and therefore it's also important to have an advice to and training for the farmers, and throughout the whole value chain also for the managers and in the companies, that this topic is very of interest for everyone.
The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is very current in political discussion right now too, but we see that it is a motivator, because you've all said that these companies are doing this and the retailers are doing this with that in mind. Can I turn to Cassie now? Have you thought of something you would like to ask the researchers? What do you really need to know from research?
Yeah, I think for us, firstly, it's been really interesting to see some of the economics of pollination services. We do some work with Reading and some of your colleagues, but I think this has been a really illuminating session. I think for us, we always have to show a return on investment for growers, and we're trying to encourage them to utilise this type of technology. And I think sometimes it's difficult for us to be able to present that business case with up-to-date data. So I think that my question would be, how can we raise awareness of the decline of pollinators and the economic impact of that in a very understandable way that farmers can quantify that and make their own decisions about how they might want to invest in suitable interventions?
There was also a question. I'm not quite sure. Okay. Yeah, there was a question here as well.
Yeah, we'll take that after Georgios has provided his answer.
Okay, regarding raising awareness, I mean, this is quite complicated that we are tackling also. I mean, it's not only the direct values. I mean, to my opinion, As Frank said, you should always turn to the collective actions or cooperatives. You have to include all the community in these discussions in order to be aware not only from the direct values that pollinators or pollination services are offering, but also for indirect values like cultural aspects or a beautiful landscape. I mean, the farmers are living in this landscape, so it's not only the direct contribution. They have to understand why it is important and what is good also for the society and for their children, for the future, and not only directly about the business. I mean, to me, you have to combine both, direct and indirect.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. I think one of the bigger challenges also in kind of demonstrating the need for a lot of this is the lack of data. And this is one of the big reasons we've been pushing for pollinator monitoring for so long. So it's difficult because we can demonstrate pollination deficit, and we have done this in numerous projects, but that requires us basically putting time in, going in, bagging flowers, and doing a lot of the legwork. So we can make these interpolations over a lot of farms, admittedly, and over a lot of different countries, but we're still a way off actually being able to make some estimates of where we think there are deficits and how much. We're actually reasonably close to this in the UK in a paper that has been waiting to be published for quite a while on my desk, my pile of shame, as I call it. So yeah, there is a question of better linking monitoring and models of pollinators, and actually being able to say where we think there are the greatest risks. We know how to do it, but it's always down to data. And it's, as Casey said, we do have some working with AgriSound because there is that sort of potential for these sort of systems to add even more data. And I think we should be having conversations with environment ministries across Europe about what data they can provide for upcoming areas like machine learning to actually be able to start making some predictions that we can then, through very targeted field work, go and actually confirm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you to pass the microphone back? We have a question from the audience here. Please introduce yourself.
It's on.
It's on.
Hello. Yeah, my name is John. I'm from Escape Network, a citizen science initiative. And my question is, in recent years, we have seen a conflict among bees, wild bees and honeybees, and also within bee colonies. So how do we draw an equilibrium in which we have enough honeybees in the fields to have an economic value? At the same time, we also try to increase the population of wild bees. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a question I think I'll ask Andreas. Would you like to?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I wanted also to mention the importance of wild bees and pollinators, not just the honeybees. Well, in our project, we did a monitoring every 4 years by independent wild bee experts, which is a certain effort to do this. But due to the measures we did in the project, insect nesting aids, and so on, we and the flower improved flower and seed supply, we could see that the amount of wild bees increased to 112 different species, which was, I think, it's a doubling of the baseline amount, and in this 112, including 26 considered as threatened in Germany. So, and this we can see that there are measures like nesting aids, flower stripes, structure, diverse structured surrounding helps to improve the wild bees also. So they need somewhere to habitat, and they need something to eat.
Thanks, and that's an excellent segue to what we will be talking about. Oh, Andreas, yeah, sorry, be quick because you're keeping us from our pollinator.
Sorry, very sorry. Very quick question, because I think you made an excellent case that the costs for pollinator support should not only be paid by public subsidies, but also that the consumers should take a fair share. But that only works with communication. It works with making a convincing case that you have a better, a more sustainable product. So do you see the chance of standardization, labeling, or do you think companies are much better off in doing their own business, knowing that the more you harmonize, the more you establish a regulatory scheme that would establish like certain standards, the more you have the additional monitoring costs, you have the reporting, you have the certification costs, which eat up part of your add to the total cost and have a certain impact on the total equation. So how would you, I mean, for companies, where do you see the future? Is it in the responsibility of the individual company doing good things, maybe also using monitoring schemes like the ones developed by Casey, but for their own informing themselves and not for reporting purposes? Or do you see the future more into a more harmonized schemes, labeling, joint approaches? Maybe not a quick question. No.
Yeah, no, not a quick question, but I want quick answers. Athanasios and Casey, please, very quickly.
Yeah, from a business perspective, we welcome standards, a regulation or regulatory push just to raise the bar, and whereas that addresses probably the worst forms of social environmental risks within supply chains, it doesn't necessarily get us to where we need. Logos, labeling does raise awareness amongst consumers, and if you ask consumers, in principle, they're all for it, but when it comes to paying, they seem less willing. And I think that's more about addressing disparity in wealth within societies. But then above and beyond certification or regulation, businesses have got different impacts and risks within their operations, so they may go off in a different direction. What you'll find with retailers, they can't differentiate between a Nespresso or Kellogg's cornflakes, where they tend to try and differentiate and create competition is over produce items, and whereas there's convergence of standards, what you then see is retailers trying to diverge to create differential for their so yeah, there are costs involved. It's a complex one, but market pull as well as regulatory push does help.
Just very quickly to add to that, I think I completely agree with that. I mean, I think short term we should focus on point of difference. In the next 5 years, I think there's brands which can really tell a good story about environmental protection and protecting pollinators as part of that core message, and we're seeing that with some of the retailers that we work with in the UK, some of the brands we work with as well. But I think longer term, I think it is going to fundamentally be a regulatory shift, and I think that bar will have to just be lifted, and that will be the cost of entry into the marketplace, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Big thank you to the panelists. And you are now invited to take a pollinator-fueled coffee break. Please be back here at, somebody remind me, 11:30. Thank you, all of you. I